Hey y'all, and welcome back to a new video in the Road 2400 series where, well, let's just say my opponent is kind of gonna be sad tonight. Either way, I'm gonna start off with the move e4. Well, my opponent starts off with the move e4. Sorry, I'm kind of slurring my words today. I go c5, the Sicilian defense, an opening I've been trying to learn for a decent bit of time, and after the move knight f3, I go with the move knight c6. Simply trying to develop my pieces, and I want to get into some pretty normal, simple lines. And for this game, this is one of the few times where I'm actually able to play the lines that I know. And after the move d4, I go cd, knight d4, and I remember what to do now. I remember what to do. The move here is the move knight to f6. Something that I've been like trying to play for a while, but normally when I play this position, I'm like, I gotta stop this, so I play d6 or something. But really, knight to f6 makes a lot of sense. So I decided to play this, and I realized that after knight to c6, b to c6, and let's put this on the board real quick. Takes, and this move e5, I simply have the move queen to a5, and I didn't get scared this time, so I'm genuinely kind of proud of myself. It's a small thing to be proud of, but you know, we take those. Instead, my opponent goes knight c3, the main line. I go d6 now, which is a very reasonable move, keeping it very normal, trying to stop this and open up my bishop. So then when he goes bishop to e3, I'm able to play knight to g5, getting rid of his dark squared bishop, which is very annoying. And a lot of the time it becomes a problem for white if black has this move knight g5. So my opponent takes on c6, an interesting line. I take on b6 on c6. Also very reasonable, and my opponent decides to do something a little bit different here. Instead of going with the natural moves like bishop to e3, maybe bishop to g5, bishop to c4, like we gotta move the dark sword bishop basically 1, 2, or 3 squares. My opponent decides to sacrifice a pawn and decides to play the move e5. And on the surface, yeah, okay, I can understand his idea. After de, queen d8, king d8, yeah, I have these doubled awkward pawns. My knight isn't doing a very good job of keeping them together, and in all likelihood, white is going to be able to quickly castle, get a rook onto the d file, and I'm probably going to lose this pawn in the long run. But after this position, and if you're wondering, yes, I had to take move knight d7. To me, it just seems like a very large positional mistake after ed. It just seems like I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do. Even something like I guess like bishop f4. This move isn't really that much of a problem due to something like I don't know, really anything like bishop d3, and it just seems pretty not bishop f4, bishop c4. Sorry, and it just seems like pretty decently bad for black. I don't know. Maybe not bishop f4, maybe bishop d3 immediately. I don't know. Either way, I thought I had to take, so I did. My opponent takes my queen. Obviously, I have to recapture, and my opponent decides to play a different move. My opponent plays the move bishop to c4, simply attacking the pawn on f7. And if I weren't to defend it, of course, white would take. One way to arbitrarily defend it, which is kind of funny, is this move g6. And I think that white cannot take due to the move e6, and the bishop is actually trapped. A little bit of fun here, a little bit of tactical mumbo jumbo. White does have a very nice way of getting out of here with the move bishop to g5. And if I were to play king to e7 immediately targeting, it would be knight takes. Not correct. Sorry. No, the move is bishop to e8. That gets him out of there immediately. If he takes first, then after king takes bishop e8, I simply have the move bishop to b7, and the bishop is again simply trapped here after something like king e7, long castles, rook to d8. Either way, that doesn't happen, and I play the move e6. Very reasonable move. Simply saying, okay, I see your attack there. I'm going to take this opportunity to develop my dark sword bishop. I don't actually see much of a way for you to really go after my doubled e pawn at the moment. So in all honesty, I think that black is doing better here, and I'm just arguing I'm a pawn. I have the bishop pair, and I should be better. My opponent goes bishop to e3. Yeah, pretty reasonable move, trying to develop the bishop. Obviously, the idea is to long castle against my king, and I thought here for a little bit, but I kind of already had a plan in mind. My idea, very quickly, very simply, very easily, was to play the simple move knight to d5, saying, okay, you know what? If you take me, I undouble my pawns, my bishop gets active, I'm just up a pawn, and I'm much better, very, very clearly. If you take me with the bishop, same thing happens. And if you do nothing, if you just like castle, which if you did castle, I mean probably king c7 is what I was going to play. There are some issues here, and probably bishop d2 is forced to prevent, like if anything, probably a knight takes c3, pawn takes c3. This doesn't look very good for white, as you can probably tell. Probably bishop d2 is forced, and then I just have a very powerful knight. Instead, after the move knight d5, my opponent decided to go a little bit crazy, and he played the move knight to e4. Not a very good move. Simply saying, you know what? I don't want my knight to be captured. That doesn't seem like exactly what I want to do. I don't want my pawns doubled. I don't want any of that. And I understand where he was coming from, but what he fails to like realize is that yes, I have some better moves here, but I thought the very simple way, concrete way to get an advantage here was to simply take the dark squared bishop. And now I have dominance over the dark squares. Sure, my light squared bishop, you can argue, is a little bit passive, standing behind some pawns, but in the long run, I think the dark squared bishop is a lot more important. I also have the bishop pair, and in reality, I'm better. Also, the pawn on e3 can become a weakness in the future, which, as we're looking at the game, it will. I think here for a good bit of time, and I think, you know what, this is actually kind of an issue, because I thought if I go king e7, that's not where I want my king. I want my king on c7, guarding this pawn. I thought that the knight was a decent bit strong there, targeting these pawns along with the bishop. I didn't like that. So what I did, I basically just told myself, you know what? I think that it's better if I just stop that, just get rid of that move entirely. A way I could have done that, and it's the best top engine move, I really should have played this move, is the move bishop to e7. Stopping this, stopping all of this. Very, very good stuff. But instead I played the move h6. Not a bad move, in all honesty, but I could have played better with bishop e7. Computer really hates this move. This engine doesn't, but game review computer does. My opponent castles with check in like 1 second. Okay, reasonable. Yeah, 2 seconds to castle with check. Yeah. King c7. That's where I wanted to go in the first place. My opponent goes rook d3, trying to advance down the d file, but I found the best move. I realized here that with the inclusion of the move h6, now I have a very nice way to acquire some space in the middle of the game with this very nice move f5. Seeing as though the knight has no forward momentum, the knight is going to have to go back. I'm going to play e4 afterwards, hitting the rook back, and if the rook goes forward, then I'm going to have bishop to c5, winning the pawn on e3, which is a weakness now. And in all honesty, my doubled pawns aren't a weakness anymore. They've become more of a strength because I'm able to utilize them properly. I'm able to go down the center with them, and I'm winning. I'm simply winning. My opponent goes knight g3. Reasonable move. I go e4 in very little time because this was my idea in the first place. My opponent goes rook d2, not wanting to go rook to d4, which would obviously simply lose the pawn after that. Yeah, you can't go here, obviously. Either way, rook d2. I go bishop c5 anyway, attacking the pawn. I thought this was a very, very accurate move. And I thought my opponent was going to play rook to e1, trying to get this rook into the game and keeping control of the d file. But instead, what he does is he goes rook e2, which is a little more passive. Very small difference, but it's a difference. And my opponent really shouldn't have played this move in all honesty, but it's not a lose the game difference. He's already losing the game. I think here for a little bit, I realized, you know what? That seems like an issue. That seems like he gets play with that. I could play the move h5 to stop that, or I could play the move g6 to stop that. I thought I would keep everything together. I'd play the move g6. Very reasonable. Now, my pawn chain is very, very strong, and basically if this pawn ever goes, also, if you're wondering, yes, I can take this and go with this fork, but that's not what I want. because after something like just this, I'm down a pawn. This pawn is weak, and I've lost a lot of advantage. We're not going to be doing that. Instead, my opponent goes knight f1 because, and what I was showing, if you can tell, was this move bishop to e3, which doesn't work. The idea is f4. Rook f4 takes, and this pawn is a grave weakness. I'm not technically down a pawn, but it sure feels like it because of my split pawn islands, the fact that he has a decent amount more play, and the fact that he's just better. Instead, after g6, my opponent goes knight f1. Reasonable move, trying to reroute somewhere, I guess. He doesn't really have that much of a plan. I would have liked him to play rook d1 first before the move knight f1, but yes, it is one of White's biggest ideas in this position. And after knight f1, I go rook d8, and I realize, you know what? If you're not going to take the d file, and you can't anymore since you blocked your own rook, I'm going to take the d file. Still can't go here. I thought that this was probably bad. Maybe even something like bishop b. No. I don't know why I thought this was bad, but, you know, to each their own. Instead, after rook d8, my opponent goes knight d2. Also very reasonable. And I go with the very, very nice move, a5. And my idea with a5 is very, very simple. This light squared bishop is the only active piece for white, right? It's the only piece that really is doing anything in the position. The rooks suck. The knight is completely dominated everywhere. I was also preparing against knight g3, knight b3 in some ways, because then after I come back with my bishop, I might come back this way, I might come back this way, don't know just yet. I might be able to play this move a4 as well. But the main idea is to get rid of his light squared bishop, and the way I would do that is with bishop a6, pinning the bishop to the rook, so then this pawn is uncapturable, and after the trade, I'm able to just simply be better again. I have the pawn chain, I have extra pawn, I have the bishop for knight, I'm better. After a5, my opponent goes h4. Okay, but there's no threat. There's just no threat. After h5, I come here. After g4, I just don't take. It's not checkers. If I were to take, yes, that would be a bad position since this pawn falls, this pawn is weak, this pawn is weak, and this pawn is weak. Well, not exactly, but something along those lines. I just wouldn't take because I would say, okay, take me. And if he goes here, I'm just simply going to lock down the position like this, not let his rook in. Bishop a6. Now, after the move a4. Since there's no threat, let's trade the bishops. I could have played the move a4. I mean, not h5, sorry, a4. Stopping knight b3, but I thought this was more than enough. Bishop a6. a3. Okay, I guess, but it doesn't work for a tactical reason. And the tactical reason is one that I found pretty quickly, is this idea that at the end of the day, my opponent, I'm going to take his knight. Right, this is the main idea. I want to take his knight and remove the defender, but what I was stopping myself about is that after taking a knight, my opponent would take my bishop, and then after I take the rook, he would come back. But in that line, I win this pawn, and I have this pawn 3 squares from promotion, and I also get the d file. So that would be pretty good for me, and I realized that pretty easily, and I go rook takes d2. Right, there's not much he can do besides bishop a6. But instead he decides to play, he realizes that bishop a6 doesn't work, so he plays king takes d2, trying to activate his king over here and trying to get some play going. Simple bishop takes c4, and I am up 2 points of material, a pawn and 2 bishops for a rook. And as you can see from the eval bar, black is easily winning. My opponent goes rook e1. I go rook d8 check. My opponent comes to c3. I simply drop it back bishop to b5, and my opponent goes b4. I think here for a little while, I didn't like this move. And I'll tell you why. It's because after the move, after AB, I would have to go back, let's say to e7, and I'm giving him play. I'm giving him play on the h file. Never something you want to do. Your opponents do not deserve play. We deserve play. You deserve play. Everyone deserves play, except for the people that you are playing in chess, which is why I did not play that move. Instead, I decided to simply come back to b6, saying, if you take me, I skewer you and I win your rook. Obviously bad. So my opponent played the move king b3, and I play a4 check, stopping these 2 pawns in their tracks And now I'm doing, well, I've always been doing quite well, but there's not much my opponent can really do now. I've kind of taken away like all his oxygen, and he is going to be thrown out of the airplane. My opponent goes king c3. Not the best analogy, but bear with me here. I think for a little bit how to make progress in the position. I go rook d5, and the idea is that I want to bring my king behind the rook, saying that if I were to do this immediately, if I were to go king e6, king d6, there might be some rook d1, king here, takes, and yeah, I'm still better, but I'm giving him the d file, and it's not exactly what I want. I guess this first. And it's not exactly what I want. Obviously, I'm winning, but I'd rather win more convincingly. So I played rook d5. My opponent goes h5, g5, of course. My opponent goes g4. I do nothing, and I simply play the move king to d6, getting my king into the center of the game, and the King of the Hill trophy will be mine shortly. My opponent goes rook h2, king e5, simply getting into the central four squares, defending my pawns. This is an idea in the future. My opponent goes rook f2. I don't really see the idea. He's trying to target my pawns, but he's never able to play this move since my bishop defends it, and I didn't really see any point, so I decided to make a pawn break on the opposite end of the board. I go c5, saying that, okay, now I might even be trying to like try to get something going here. After king takes, I don't even know. There's probably some way to win like right away. I don't even know. That was actually my analysis, by the way. I don't even know. There's probably some way to win. I don't even know. That was exactly my analysis. But I thought c5 was a very reasonable move. My opponent goes king b2. Okay. I take on b4. He recaptures on b4. And I go with f4. After takes, I would take back with the pawn. And now I would have two passed pawns. And what my opponent doesn't have is counterplay. My opponent doesn't have any of that. His rooks are stopping my rook from infiltrating, which is good. Like, that's what they want to do. But my opponent doesn't have any way to give me any threats. His main threat involves coming down with these two pawns, but even after something like ef, and coming down with this, I mean, like, first of all, the rook is hanging, but let's say the rook wasn't hanging. Let's say I just took here. Like, I'm fine. Like, this pawn, like, it looks scary, but I'm all right. Here I can even take the rook, which is nice, and after this move, I can go with... I mean, my idea was check and, like, I don't know, I guess c3. I don't know, maybe, I guess not check then. Rook g8 is the way to go. Simply stopping the pawn, and I have enough time for basically anything. So my opponent doesn't do that, and instead it goes with the move c4, sacking a pawn because he doesn't have much else to do. Bishop takes c4. He tries to come in on the c file. Very reasonable idea. Simply saying that after bishop e5, he might get in with some of this in the future. But first, my opponent decides to go with ef, gf4. Yes, I could have taken back with the king. Technically the best move. I don't care. Gf4. My opponent goes g5, takes, h6. I come back with my rook to d7. Simply, I'm going to stop the pawn, and then I'm going to like slowly get my bishop involved over there to this square. Maybe something like this. I don't know. There's ways to get my bishop involved. Also, not to mention, I have 3 connected passed pawns on the other side of the board, so it makes sense that after the move rook c8 and rook to h7, my opponent simply resigns the game. He resigns the game here. You might say, he resigns the game. What? He still has. Isn't this a skewer? What? This is a skewer, right? No. Bishop d4. It comes with a check, and after something like king a3, I can simply bring my bishop to d3. This pawn is not an issue. I win this pawn in all lines, and yeah, I can even sack for this pawn. Like, after this, probably this is winning too, right? I mean, 3 passed pawns are pretty good. They're normally like decent, so it makes sense why he resigned. Either way, that's all I have for you today. I hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you guys found this entertaining, instructive, all of the above. If you did, remember to like, subscribe, do all the normal things YouTubers tell you to do. And yeah, that's all I've got for you today. Yeah, good evening and good night.